I'm going to leave a few notes for the producer. Hi, Alyssa, it's Jana, and I've already read Zach. Zach, it's Mathers, right?
I say Mathers, but everyone else says
Mathers,
Mathers.
okay.
Yep.
So I'm here with Zach Mathers, and I am going to, his lead-in has already been done, and you have all the notes on the board. So we're just going to get started. 3, 2, 1. So Zach, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here to get a share. So
me too. You know what? Here's what we do on this show. We share our stories of hope. And I know you have a really powerful story. Do you want to go ahead and share that with us?
Yeah, I would love to. And I believe so much in that, the idea that we all have a story. And a lot of times I think people believe they don't. And so I love that you have people share their stories because, I think that's just such a key to our, each one of us have something so unique that's about us. So yeah, my story, I'll start with where I am now and then I will guide you there. So I live in Hawaii. I've been married for 15 years and I have 3 amazing children. My wife and I have been foster parents, and we run a ministry working with a nonprofit working with the foster care here in Hawaii. So that's kind of like where I'm at now. And I wanted to share that because if I back up, when I was young, I got married at 21 years old, really young. And I was always one of those people that anything I put my mind to, I was able to accomplish. As far as if right out of college, I started a nonprofit. Just constantly, anything I kind of did worked for me. And so about the age 23, I am at this point, I'm a pastor of a small church, senior pastor, which is really young, to be honest, to be a senior pastor. It's a growing little community, little church. Been married now for 3 years, and my first son was just born. And in this time, I had an affair on my wife, and I began to deal with, I was hiding it. And in that, I had so much shame for me because what it was one of those things that, in the character of me growing up was one of those things that I said, I would never do this. I would never be someone that would cheat on their spouse, or so it was like the ultimate thing that I said I never would do. And I did. So I owned it, with the idea that I figured my marriage was gone and everything was, but I knew I couldn't continue to live with hiding it. So I came home one day, and there's no good time to tell your spouse. And so I came home one day and just shared with my wife and said, here's what I did. Here's what happened. I need to get it out to you. And she grabbed our newborn son and left. And she actually headed to my parents' house. So I called my parents and said, here's what happened. Here's what I did. Support my wife and my kid. And then I called the elders of the church and said, here's what I did. And so all within a span, I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost my kid, and I lost my community. So, so I was kind of in a pretty dark space, and it was my actions. It was my choices. It wasn't something that someone else did to me, but it was me that the actions I chose that put me where I was, but I still was where I was. And so I started to drink to deal with the pain and the shame I had. I had so much shame around my actions that I didn't know how to cope with it. And so I would isolate and I would drink to medicate the shame. And that went on for a while. And we slowly, my wife said, hey, I started getting into see a great counselor and started working on stuff, kind of became aware of my drinking at that point, but didn't want to do anything about it yet. And my wife just said, I will come and meet with you to see a counselor. And so we slowly started marriage counseling. And it was a slow process of rebuilding everything I broke. And we slowly got back together, and it was all new. We had to figure out she had to figure out how to trust me again, and I had to figure out how to earn her trust back. And so the reason I start with the end result is, we're 15 years into our marriage, and our marriage has been a phenomenal, amazing, rocky up and down, but we have worked really hard. And in that, my part of my story is I let shame really I felt like I was disqualified to speak any truth to the world anymore, because I held on to the shame of being a failure and failing for probably 8 years. I put my head down, got a job, did normal stuff, and never began to live into anything that I felt like I was called to do, or my identity, or anything I said. I just kind of was like, that part of me is shut out. I can't do it. And so I lived with this shame for a really long time. And slowly I began to kind of peel back the layers. I see shame as not this one thing that you recognize and move through, but it has kind of layers like onions, where you peel back a layer of the shame and there's a little bit more, and then you peel that back and you keep kind of working. And so I work through um, just different layers and layers of shame that I felt I carried on myself, and to a point where a couple of years ago, I finally felt free to be able to go, I have a voice. I'm unique. I have a story to tell, and I don't have to let the fear and the shame hold me back anymore. And so that's when I began to move into really beginning to speak out on my part.
I actually love your story, Zach. And I think that people don't realize how powerful their stories are. And I say all the time, your story is a beacon of light that you shine out into the world, reaches out and touches the people who need to hear it. It might be the miracle or exactly the story of hope that they need to keep moving forward. And I had a dad who was an alcoholic, and it disrupts your whole family, right? And he
Yeah.
did fix things many years later. And it wasn't until his funeral that I realized that was his journey. Like
Yeah.
that was his purpose in life, wasn't to be this great dad, because he wasn't. It was to go through all of that to get exactly where he was at, because at his funeral, I had never been to an AA meeting because I didn't drink, but
Yeah.
I it was 4 hours long, and all these people kept coming up to the mic and saying how they met my
Mm.
dad and how what he did changed their life and how they were where they're at today because of him. He would not have been there had it not been his journey, nor
Yeah.
you with your message had it not been for your journey.
It's true. It's true. Sometimes I know for myself, I wanted to avoid my journey. I wanted to go, it's too painful. Um, or I screwed up too much, that I just wanted to kind of shut it down and not pretend like it wasn't part of my story anymore. But I think once I began to own it and go, yeah, that was part of me. Um, I'm human. I fail, and I'm going to, I'm going to fail. It's the option. Do I get up again? You know?
Well, you get up again for sure. And
Yeah.
when you get up, you're better for it. Like I
Yeah.
know that you are better for it. And it's so much different, like someone touching a pot and saying, your mom telling you constantly, don't touch that, don't touch that. You learn that lesson when you touch it and you burn your hand. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not touching that again. So you definitely went down somewhere that I know will never happen again. It
Yes.
just won't, because
Yeah.
you have gone through it and you know where you want to go and where you don't want to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I know you have a podcast. I want to talk a little bit about it, Braving the Journey.
Yeah.
And I know you
Yeah.
share stories of hope. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I want people to visit it, because I think messages of hope, especially right now, are so needed in this world.
Well, yeah. So Braving the Journey kind of birthed out of this idea for me that um, when we struggle, which we're all going to, whether it's a struggle that we put on ourselves, like me having the affair, that I chose that action, and I chose to drink. Those are things I chose, but it was still my struggle. And then there's other struggles that people are going to have that others do to them that cause the struggle. But regardless, life is never going to be picture perfect all the time. We're going to go through ups and downs and struggles. And my belief is that when we struggle, we have a tendency to believe a lie that says we are the only ones that are struggling with whatever the struggle is. And when we believe that lie, we move towards a place of isolation and go, man, I'm the only one that's dealing with this. I'm the only one struggling here. And we hide it and we struggle and we stay in this isolation space. And my belief is that we need to be able to hear stories of others that are in a struggle, so that way we go, oh, I'm not alone. And then we can begin to step and move towards a place of community, because I believe that we were designed by nature to be connected to one another. We were designed to be in community, in relationship, and grow from being next to other people. And so when we move to isolation because we're hiding because of our struggle, we're never going to move out of it. or it's going to be really difficult too. But when we can move to a place of going, I'm not alone, there is help. How do I do this? Um, so that's the heart behind braving the journey. So what I do is I have a lot of guests on that share. They're sometimes they're still in the middle of their struggle. They're not through it yet. Because a lot of times we have a tendency to hear stories of people that have already come through it, and we go, oh, "That's neat for them," but I'm stuck in the middle. And so sometimes I have people that are still in it. And then on top of that, I bring in kind of experts in different fields, therapists that can talk through different issues with like PTSD or trauma or anxiety, so that we get to hear kind of both sides. You get to hear a story and connect to it, but then you also get to go, okay, what do I do with this now? Um, so that's kind of what I do with the podcast. I am moving in the direction of doing some group coaching, which I'm really excited about, because my belief, especially in the world of addiction, uh, addiction kind of has two ways. You either go to like an AA meeting or you go to a recovery center, um, like an outpatient or inpatient recovery center. But those are kind of the two directions. And if you've tried both of them and failed at them and you're still struggling with your addiction, you're kind of stuck in the space of being like, well, what else do I do? I failed. I can't do it. And so my hope is to take a group of people through, and what I'm calling it is just um, from addiction to identity. Because I think when people can begin to understand and learn who their true identity is, they can move from a place of addiction into a place of living out their true self and who they're meant to be.
I
So
love
yeah.
that. I do think though that people keep thinking that they'll get to a place of health and wellness, and that it's not a destination, it's a journey. So
Mm,
sometimes you are stuck in the middle for a really long time, and sometimes you get through it a lot faster than others, but you're never there because it's really not a destination. You're never going to get there. We should constantly be working on being better people, better human beings, healthier
yep.
human beings. So
No.
when you're working with people, do you work with people mostly just with addiction? And are you working mostly with men, or both men and women?
Men and women, and some addiction, and a lot of shame. I think shame can be tied to, like, even right now I'm seeing a lot with COVID. I'm seeing people that are unemployed because of COVID carry with them this sense of shame, like they failed somehow, um, because they're not able to provide financially, like as like as a husband of a family going, I can't provide. So he carries a lot of shame attached to it, when that doesn't have to be the case. But it's helping reshift the narrative that's going on inside of the head, and restructuring kind of where your value is placed at. Are you valuing the things that you do, or are you valuing who you are inside of you? um, so yeah, I like to work with people struggling through addictions, because it's something I personally have gone through and I can relate to and connect to. And same with the area of shame. I think shame is um, something that holds people back way more than we give it credit. And I think it needs to become something that's more freely talked about, and helped people kind of guided through how to step out of it.
So I'm so glad we're having this call today, because I recently had someone come to me and let me know that they were struggling with an addiction. And
Hmm.
I never respond right away, because first I respond by getting angry with them.
Yeah.
And then I respond by trying to fix it all. And what I have learned is I can't fix anyone else but myself. And it's not my job either. Like, this is their journey. This is their lot in life to get through and learn whatever they're going to learn. But when
Yeah.
people come to you and they have friends, family that are struggling, what are some things that we can do, like, to help move them on, and not be like, if we go in and we try to fix it all, if they did something, they get a DUI and we know they have a drinking problem, we go and bail them out and we take care of
Yeah.
them. Like, we're not helping that situation, right? So
No.
what are some of the things that we can do to be loving, supporting, decent human beings, and yet help them on that journey?
So I love at your beginning how you just said it. Like, we want to either get angry at them or we want to fix it, right? And I love that, because I remember one of the things I had to do in my beginning of my recovery. Um, I stood in the middle of the hula hoop, and this is what my sponsor had me do, and I was like, "This is ridiculous. What am I doing?" He's like, "I want you to stand in the hula hoop. Just stand there." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I want you to list inside the hula hoop 5 things that you have control over, 10 things in the hula hoop you don't have control over, and then 100 things outside of this hula hoop that you don't. And for me, it was a really big aha moment where I don't really have a lot of control outside of my hula hoop. I just have a few things and even inside my hula hoop, I don't control my heart beating. It does it on its own. I don't control the hair that grows on my head. It does it by itself. I don't control these things. But what I do have control of, there's some things. And so what I tell people that have maybe a loved one or a spouse or somebody, um, is first and foremost, stay in your hula hoop and take care of yourself. Like you have to take care of yourself because, you know, my wife came to a really healthy space where she chose to say, I'm going to still love you. Um, but I'm going to take care of myself, and I can't fix you. I really can't. She could have tried till she was blue in the face to help me. We set up parameters and different ideas and things, but really it came down to, I had to choose to say, I want this. And it's so difficult to watch somebody you love struggle through an addiction, because all you want to do is just shake them out and go, listen, here, I have one of my really good friends from my whole life still is in the midst of his addiction. And we call and we talk probably every couple weeks, you know, and I realize there's not a lot I can do for him except for be there. So I think there's a big difference for people to realize, between enabling somebody and being there and loving and supporting somebody. Uh, Enabling says, you know, oh yeah, you've already had a few to drink and you can't drive. Let me go buy you some more. Or you create space for them to continue their bad habits and behaviors. That's kind of enabling them. Loving them says, I'm not going to create the space for you to do this because that's not healthy. And this was inside my hula hoop. So if you're going to choose to say, jump into your addiction, you're not welcome here because my hula hoop, it's not safe for you to be here, for me. And so it's difficult, but, you know, a lot of times it requires tough love. And I had that. I had 5 guys in my life that called me over one day for a barbecue, and they were like, yeah, come over. And I really thought I was going over for a barbecue, and it was an intervention on my behalf. And they all sat me down, and they just said, we're not willing to sit by and watch you destroy your marriage by drinking. And we're just not. So we're going to stand on your wife's side and your kid's side, and we support them 100%. And we're here to tell you that we support them. And what are you going to do about it? They didn't tell me how to fix it. They didn't tell me what to do. They just said, we just want you to know we love you, and we love you so much that we care about your marriage that we're going to stand by your wife. And that was it. Looking back and having conversations with these men, they were like, that was the most difficult conversation. And nobody wanted to do it. I didn't want to be there, neither did they. But they did it out of love, you know, and they came at it out of a position of love, not anger, not fix yourself so I could have a better friend. It was all based off just, hey, we love you. Uh, and so you gotta approach it with love.
I agree. And I think setting those boundaries and keeping ourselves healthy when someone else is going through this is so important. One of the things that I love that you did is that you looked inside and decided where you were going wasn't where you wanted to be. And you went and put it all out there, knowing that you would probably lose your wife, your child, that you had a long journey. You may never get it all back. But I think that accountability and that stepping forward and saying, what's the first thing they do in AA? Hello, I am an alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
Saying those words, getting it out there is a hugest part and probably one of the hardest things to do. Because I know, I mean, I'm feeling for you walking in, having to put it all out there and break your wife's heart and know that she's probably going to walk out and take your family with you. And where are you left? With nothing, right? So it's almost
Right.
better to keep it bottled up inside and live with that shame and that secret. But the truth of the matter is, it literally became a new beginning for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, you had to work hard to get back, but you
Mhm.
got back.
Yeah. And I think if I would have tried to keep it inside, I think it would have eaten me alive. You know, I think it would have been such internal turmoil, um, that I don't think I would have ever gotten back myself, who I am, you know, and that became the reality of for me of going, I'm going to own what I did because I want, if anything, I want my son to grow up going, hey, at least I know my dad screws up, but he owns it. Um, one of the things I remember at the very years ago, I don't even remember who it was asked me. They're like, I want you to write down your funeral. I want your funeral for you to write out what your wife would say about you, what your kids would say about you, what your friends would say about you, what your coworkers would say about you. And so I sat down and I wrote out, when I die, if I die tomorrow, what would my son say? My dad was this. He was a loving father. He cared for us. He gave us time and energy. Whatever it was I wanted them to say at the end of the day. And I wrote those out, and then what it's called is kind of working backwards. Okay, I know the end result. I want this. I want them to be able to say this about me. And now let's rework it backwards. What does it take for me to live out those things today so that they'll say that about me tomorrow? Um, and that was a really big thing for me, because I almost had like the end of the story script written out. I want to be these things: loving, caring, compassionate, kind, um, all these things. So what do I have to do today to live that out? You know, and that was a really, really big exercise that I held on to, and I stuck it on my wall for a long time. And I would sit there and look at it and be like, am I living into that today so that my son will say those things about me, or am I not?
I think that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to touch on is when people are going through any kind of addiction, eating addiction, sex addiction, drug addiction, alcohol. There's just so many addictions.
Yeah.
Even workaholics, right? They let their family is on the side, and it's all about that job.
Yep.
And there's got to be some balance in life. And here's the thing: you are alone. The only one that can fix you is you.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you're alone on your journey, but you're not by yourself. Does that make sense? Like
Mm.
if somebody needs that kind of support, where do you suggest somebody's listening to this right now? They're thinking, wow, I'm ready to make that change in my life. I'm ready to move on. I can't live like this anymore. I'm tired of carrying the guilt and the shame around with me, but I don't even know where to go. Like if they go to their spouse, I guarantee you first they're going to be angry
Yep.
and they're going to react like, get away from me. They've got to heal too and come to the same sort of healing that you have to come to. And so their journey's completely different, and you can't fix it. You can only fix yourself and hope that that's enough to have them want to be with you again.
Yeah.
But where would they go so they're not alone? They get that community support. And by the way, I raised daughters and a son, 3 daughters and a son. My daughter
Yeah.
spilled something on me, and I was like, I've been there, done that, have the t-shirt. I know exactly what you're up to. My son did
Yep.
something, and I would cry, and I'd be like, why? I don't even understand why you did that.
Mm.
But my girl's thought process, I knew. So when you're talking to somebody else who shared the same addiction and
Yeah.
has recovered, you can't pull that game on them. They're like,
No,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I hear it all the time. Oh, like even like sometimes at the beginning, they're like, I'm gonna stop drinking because I have a drinking problem, but I'm gonna continually smoke weed. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Like, give it a shot. It's not gonna probably work.
self-medicating, right?
Yeah, you're choosing, but that, like you said, addiction is. I think we're all addicted to something, and the reason B is there's always, I think, inside of the depths of our soul, something dissatisfied with about life. Even if you have the best life in the world, there's something that you're always kind of gnawing at. And so there's a lot of addictions that look really good though on the outside. There's people that work out probably to the extreme, and we kind of praise them almost like, oh, look at how well you do, and they still could be choosing to use that addiction as an escape for something that they're not dealing with in life. And that's usually all an addiction is a place that we can escape to because we're not willing to deal with something going on in the root of who we are. Um, but to your question, as far as, okay, someone goes, wow, I hear this and I'm aware I have a struggle and addiction. It's a sex addiction, or it's a eating or, addiction, and they're wanting help. I would say first, be willing to look at your closest circle of people around you, whether that's family, loved ones, and ask yourself the question, is there anybody in this group that's healthy enough that would support me in figuring out what the steps are I need to do? And hopefully they have somebody. one person, just one person in their life. It could be their spouse. It could be, um, a family member, somebody that they know that when they bring their struggle to them, that they're not going to react and take it on themselves, but they're going to be a supportive person to walk through it. If they don't have that, there's a beauty in the fact that there are amazing therapists, counselors, coaches out there that you could reach out to and say, okay, I'm gonna find one of these and that align with what I'm after, and I'm gonna do that. And then the other piece is there's support groups for every single addiction out there. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, there's NA, there's SA for sex addiction. If you are kind of a believer churchgoer, there's Celebrate Recovery within churches. There's all these different options and support groups. But the problem, what usually holds us back from moving into any kind of support, is pride. And it was for me. I didn't want to show up to the rooms and say, hey, I'm Zach and I'm alcoholic. I didn't want to have to admit it. I didn't want to be defined by it. I didn't want uh, to show that I was weak in it, and I wanted to think that I could overcome it by myself. And my track record showed me that I couldn't, and I had to kind of step into being okay. So it takes pride. It takes a lot of kind of breaking down of your pride and being willing to admit, going, I have an issue. I can't solve it by myself. So is there anyone around me that loves me, that could support me and hold my hand through this? If there's not, there's hired people, professionals that can walk you through it. And if you can't financially afford that, then just get on Google and just Google in your area, what support groups. Because of COVID, everything's gone online too. You can go to any support group anywhere in the world right now, which is nice. And at the same time, I miss the in-person. So, and I tell people, Braving the Journey, go to my website and just email me or call me. My number's on there, and say, hey, I just need to talk. Um, I'm aware of this struggle now, and I don't know what to do.
I also think that part of doing that is becoming accountable, because
Yeah.
you drink in secret, whatever your addiction is, you hide it, right? And the minute you
Yep.
have to say those words, that now people are going to hold you accountable. And if you're not showing up, were you drunk? Like, why didn't you come? Were you doing this? Like, so I think that we're afraid to put it out there because now we have to become accountable for our actions, and
Yeah.
people are going to question us because it's out there on the table. That's part of the best part about getting better, is having them hold us accountable.
Yeah, because the reality is we need people to hold us accountable, because there's going to be days that we just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and we're just going like, I can't do it today. And those are the days where the accountability comes into play. I remember one of my sponsors said, I want you to call me every day. Just call me every day. And I was like, I don't what? Okay. I always kind of was like, okay, I will. I called him every day and I didn't know why, and I sometimes would call and just be like, hey, I'm calling you. Bye. Like, I was just not in a space to really want to talk. I just would say, I'm calling you. Um, Down the road, months in, he said, I have you call me every day, so it becomes habit. So the days that you actually are about to want to go drink, you already have created the habit inside of you to call me. Because if you hadn't created that habit, and then the day you went to drink, you're not going to call. But at least now you got a little bit more chance of connecting with me because you created the habit. And that's part of it. It's just, we need to create habit of being in accountable relationships with other human beings.
I love that. Where can people find you, Zach?
You can find me on Braving the Journey. That's on Instagram. It's there. Bravingthejourney.com is the website, which you can find me and direct to all the different aspects of there also. So, and then the podcast is on Apple Podcast, Spotify, all that too. It's just Braving the Journey.
Well, we're definitely going to have all of those links put up for you in the show notes, so you guys can go and connect with Zach. And I encourage you to do that. If you're not to the point where you can reach out and talk to a family member yet, then reach out to a stranger who's been through that, and they understand the importance of, getting it out there and taking those first few steps, because every journey starts with one step, right? I know that's so corny, but it's true.
It's so true. So,
Well,
and all we have is today. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, and our past is already done. So today is what we have. So we got to live into it.
Honestly, that's how I've created my last decade. It's like, I'm not even supposed to be alive. And I was just doing one day at a time, which is, I know a term they use all the time
Yep.
for recovering addicts, but I was like, I'm here today, right now, in this moment. So I'm going to enjoy it because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And I did it for 10 years and here I am still. So it
That's
works,
amazing.
guys.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.